Welcome to Time Monk Radio. You are listening to part 13 of the 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way with Susan Wheat at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. I hope you've had a wonderful week since we last talked.
I did, and I hope you did as well.
Yes, although it has gotten a lot hotter. We've been having a mild summer, but I must say the corn and the squashes really appreciate the heat, even if the humans don't so much.
I would agree.
We are continuing our exploration of the 7 medicines. Serenity medicine, story medicine, faith medicine, lifestyle medicine, alternative medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, and high-tech medicine. These 7 medicines are available to all of us, and one of the reasons that I talk about the 7 medicines and work with them in all of my books is because I live in a culture that seems to honor only pharmaceutical medicine and high-tech medicine. And these 7 medicines are in this order because the order describes how much harm they can do to us. And at this point, almost everyone has some kind of horror story of someone who went for some simple malady and wound up through pharmaceutical intervention or surgical intervention, or even sometimes through the intervention of a diagnostic test, has been harmed. So we're looking at all 7 of these medicines, and we're spending quite a lot of time looking especially at the early medicines, serenity medicine, a very overlooked medicine in our culture, but one that is gaining much more prestige as people come more and more to understand that meditation, which is one of the serenity medicines, really can be a wonderful healer, and especially mindfulness meditation. Story medicine, again, something that is rather overlooked in our culture, but that in the tradition I work in, the wise woman tradition, story medicine is seen to be one of the 3 most important aspects of nourishment. That nourishment is not just what we take into our bodies, but nourishment is also the stories that we are nurtured on. And nourishment is also feeling that we are constructive, useful members of our culture. Very important. And the 3rd medicine, which is faith medicine or mind medicine or energy medicine or vibrational medicine or placebo medicine. I often say that this is the shaman's playground. It is as broad as the human imagination. And that's where we are right now. A month ago, I said, this topic is so vast that I'm going to be hard-pressed to get it into the next 6 shows. And I admit defeat. I have indeed defeated myself. When I sat down to look at the aspects of vibrational medicine, of energy medicine, of mind medicine that we haven't yet discussed, I realized that I simply was not going to be able to limit myself simply to 2 half-hour shows. So get ready for a lot more about our 3rd medicine. And I want to start off by going a little bit back, because the last time we were talking about music and sound and color and how these things are vibrations. I talked about the training that I had in color therapy, which was done with colored light. And there is actually such a thing as light therapy. I have in front of me a book called Light, Medicine of the Future by Jacob Lieberman. And he tells us that we can use light to heal ourselves now. He wants us to understand that we are photocells, and that light influences us not just in terms of what we can see, but it influences the functioning of every cell in our body. My teacher, Jean Houston, was very much into health as a factor of timing. and that timing and rhythmicity were, she felt, the critical things to look to in terms of being healthy. And Dr. Lieberman reminds us that this rhythmicity really starts within ourselves. He then talks about why it's important to get light into the actual eyes themselves. And he's not talking about staring at the sun and hurting your eyes. He's talking about actually not wearing sunglasses all the time. My mom had very poor vision, was legally blind, and my personal sight, although far better than hers, has always been limited in certain respects, both because I'm extremely nearsighted. I tease that I'm the only 70-year-old woman who has to take her glasses off to read the phone book, and because of astigmatism. So one of my explorations in alternative medicine was to explore the Bates method of improving your eyesight. I can't say with any assurance that the 2 years that I spent working with the Bates method, both at home on a regular daily basis and with a Bates trainer, at first once a week and then once a month, truly improved my eyesight. In other words, if we had gone to an optometrist and tested my vision at the beginning and then at the end of those 2 years, I wouldn't say to you that the optometrist would have been able to see anything different, but I can tell you that I certainly saw differently and much, much better in terms of what I truly wanted to see. And part of that was because part of the Bates method is a very interesting, very simple technique called palming. I want to describe palming because it is so useful and so easy to do. In palming, we sit. You can sit cross-legged, or you can sit in a chair, and you want to put your elbows on your knees, the right elbow on the right knee, the left elbow on the left knee. But before you do that, you want to briskly rub your hands together. Rub your hands together very quickly until your hands, the palms of your hands, feel warm. Then you're going to lean over, put your elbows on your knees, and let your head fall forward so that your upper head is cupped in your palms. The heel of your hand rests on your cheekbone, and the fingers themselves are resting on your forehead, so that where the cup of the palm is where the eye is, so that there's space there. You're not actually touching the eyelid. And one imagines, eyes closed or open, that all the muscles of the eye are completely relaxed, and the eyes can simply gently and lovingly fall out into the hands. One then breathes slowly and with awareness, sitting, palming the eyes. And it's recommended to do this for a minute or even two. And when one is done, then one looks down into a sunlit scene. It is important, if at all possible, to do this outside, at least during the beginning stages of learning about palming. And indeed, I found that looking at the sunlit scene did something quite amazing to my eyes. Little did I know. It was also doing something to my pineal, which is the seat of the soul. In many, many traditions, the third eye is really where the spirit or the soul lives. And Dr. Lieberman says that the pineal gland is the body's light meter, and that when we don't get actual sunlight by looking at a sunlit scene in our eyes, then the pineal cannot function properly. It can't really set up the rhythm for our entire body, because the pineal is the regulator. It regulates the hormones, it regulates the immune system, it regulates the nervous system, it regulates the cardiovascular system. it does this through its ability to regulate hormones, but there is feedback between all of these systems and the pineal. Light through the eyes not only affects the eyes, it affects the pineal. The colors are the rainbow of life. And he talks about specific scientific studies that have found, just as my teacher said, that specific colors are actually healing for specific problems. Why red light can stop migraines. What happens when you put prisoners in the pink? Blue light can cure jaundiced babies and relieve arthritis. Again, this is not someone like most of my teachers in color who was more metaphysical than physical. This is a hard scientist who's looking into the hard science behind what really goes on in what I'm calling the third medicine, mind medicine. Perhaps it's not all in our minds, or perhaps it is in our minds, because that's where the pineal is. What about illumination that isn't good for us? Is there such a thing as illumination that isn't good for us? Yes, there is. Sunlight is a full spectrum light. If you put a crystal in sunlight, it breaks up into the 7 colored rays. It is thought in metaphysics that there is such a crystal that exists above the head of each and every living thing. And that when sunlight strikes that crystal, it breaks up into those 7 rays, which are then absorbed by the chakras. More and more people spend more and more time inside, and when they do go outside, act as though the sun is their enemy. By being inside, they are being under a variety of different illuminations. And the work of John Ott was certainly critical for me. Have you ever heard of the work of John Ott, Gemini?
No, I've not. I'm making a note of it.
OTT. What he originally did was he was in charge of doing the photography for the fast motion studies of plant growth for Walt Disney Studios.
Oh, okay.
So he set up a camera and a light, and the camera and the light, they would be on a timer, and they would take a picture of the plant like every 6 hours or every 12 hours. And then those would be put together so that it would look like that that plant was growing very, very fast. Of course, nowadays a computer could do that for us, but back then it was done really slowly, laboriously in this way. And one of the things that John Ott noticed when he was doing this was there were some plants that when that flash went off in the middle of the night, that's it. They stopped growing. And he was amazed by that, and it brought him into studying light and discovering a lot of what Lieberman is telling us here in the healing powers of light and what happens to us when we are under fluorescent light. And I was absolutely astonished to discover several years ago that somehow behind my back was nobody defending my right of choice. My incandescent bulbs were taken away from me, and I was supposed to be living under fluorescent light. I'm not going to argue whether or not it's ecological. It may or it may not be. Fluorescent lights do contain some pretty nasty things in the ballast, even the ones that are made for homes, and those are going to wind up in our landfills. So while it uses less energy to run them, the long-term effect is not very nice. But more to the point, having read John Ott more than a quarter of a century ago, I knew I didn't want to be under what he calls the malillumination of fluorescent light because it's not full spectrum. Now, what John Ott makes available, he's of course no longer alive, but through his company, is full spectrum fluorescent light. And what I did when I was supposed to just go out and buy fluorescent bulbs, when my incandescents burned out, was I found a source for Blues Buster bulbs, and they are full spectrum incandescent bulbs, which are still available. They're very expensive, but as far as I'm concerned, my health is absolutely worth it. Dr. Lieberman also then moves into a very dense part of his book in which he talks about the actual effects of sunlight on the human body. Vitamin D, ultraviolet light, radiation, SAD, a lot of things that we know about light that have not been put together for most of us in a way that's very coherent or very reasonable. And then his book ends with several chapters on the new frontier and the work that he is doing in using light and with it color as a tremendous aid to healing here in the third medicine, the third river of healing, light, the medicine of the future by Jacob Lieberman, a really fascinating book. And I also, this is perhaps our little book report section of talking about this, because there are books and authors who have not just been important to me, but I feel that they bring a lot together. And you're not just like John Ott is a wonderful person to read, but he's just doing what John Ott does and working just in that one narrow band of working with light, whereas Joseph Lieberman brings together basically everybody's thoughts and what everybody is doing with light and color. And just so, James Oschmann, O-S-C-H-M-A-N, James Oschmann's book, Energy Medicine, The Scientific Basis, brings together information from all over. I was very privileged to have the opportunity to hear James speak. And as with many people, I don't remember any of the specifics of what he said. It was a fascinating talk, and I was quite enthralled the entire time. But what really stuck with me was his saying that there is plenty of scientific basis for energy medicine, and there has been. And what happened to it, in his opinion, was that the drug companies took over the medical schools and made pharmaceutical medicine, the sixth medicine, be the de facto medicine. James Oschmann gives us a historical background of energy fields and, of course, vitalism and electrotherapy, and how energy and electricity are somewhat similar, but somewhat different. There is an electricity that comes from the heart. There is a magnetism that the heart actually creates. What happens to the patterns and rhythms of our heart and our brain when they are impacted by energies from other things, computers and lights and so on? And again, this is the hard scientific evidence about it. The circuitry of the body, how information flows through the body, how the electrical energy in the body is a living matrix, and how this connects up with solid state biochemistry and piezoelectricity. Again, we are not talking someone who is writing for those who are mildly curious about energy medicine. I've brought to this show 2 books for people who have said, I hadn't really ever considered this kind of medicine anything worthwhile before, but I'm beginning to get a glimmer of light. I'm beginning to feel a tingle of energy here. Perhaps there is something more than just pharmaceutical medicine and high-tech medicine. Perhaps energy medicine does indeed have a scientific basis. We are then brought into 5 views of the living matrix, which is you, me, each and every living form. Albert Szent-Györgyi, the electronic conduction view. Robert O. Becker, the perineural control system view. Herbert Froelich and Donald Ingber, the biological coherence view. And K.J. Pienta and D.S. Coffey with their view of the living matrix, and he flows from that right into acupuncture. Now, you may have noticed that in all of the things that I have said are part of energy medicine, and there's a long list of them, and I've also said I haven't even listed them all. One of the things I have not mentioned is acupuncture. And people say to me, well, isn't acupuncture energy medicine? I mean, doesn't it work along like the energy meridians of the body? And I say that is true. But in energy medicine, we are not penetrating the body physically. I have seen in the working of these medicines that not only are they arranged in order of harm, the least harmful being first and the most harmful being last, that they are also arranged in the order of contact. The least contact being the first and the most contact, including cutting into human bodies, sending x-rays through human bodies, and so on, being the last. So with acupuncture, we are actually inserting a needle through the skin. This means that it could not be an energy medicine. Energy medicine, the third river, there is very little touch on the body. Think about what we've been talking about. We've been talking about thoughts. We've been talking about colors. We've been talking about light. We've been talking about placebos. We've been talking about Reiki. We have not been talking about something in which the body is really physically touched. There might be the laying on of hands, but it is simply that, the laying on of hands, and then the movement of that. Furthermore, what acupuncture says it does is that it stimulates or sedates the flow of energy through the meridians. And it is the fifth river, the river of alternative medicine, which is in my system of steps, is step 4, stimulate, sedate. And that is what acupuncture does. And we'll be getting to alternative medicine, which is where acupuncture is, in the fifth river. But we will, at that time, have to come back to this river, because there's some very interesting developments going on in acupuncture. And those developments seem to be pointing to the possibility that what has really been going on all along is not stimulus and sedation through the needles, but the healing transference of vital force from the practitioner to the healer. And one of the things that we'll find when we talk about acupuncture is that, in fact, the use of needles is fairly new, and that traditionally, rather than the skin being broken with needles, these points were pressed. If they are pressed with some force, we would still keep it in the fourth river, but if they are simply pressed lightly, then it could very well be and energy medicine. The medical uses of electricity, including polarity therapy, therapeutic touch, magnet therapy, fields both projected from magnets and from the hands are included here. Now, magnet therapy, of course, one might say, oh, well, is that like alternative medicine? Actually, I would say no. And I'll tell you why, and I could be wrong in this, but I know that the Earth itself produces a very large magnetic field. As a matter of fact, it's that magnetic field that pretty much protects us from some of the more rip-roaring stuff that comes roaring off the sun there. And so I think to myself, I am living in this huge magnetic field, a magnetic field so strong that if I take out a compass, it will make the needle of the compass move. How much effect is taping a single small magnet to my body or putting it in my clothing or in my bed going to have? To my mind, none at all. There is a lot more in this book, including looking at homeopathy as a vibrational medicine, what the vibration is in homeopathy, and we're going to talk about homeopathy next week, and how Rolfing, chiropractic, Feldenkrais, Alexander, myofascial release, and other related techniques are structural and therefore part of alternative medicine, but are at one and the same time energetic. And the softer of these moves more and more toward the energetic. There's a wonderful woman in my community who does myofascial release. I know another woman in Toronto who does myofascial release. And it is such an amazing technique. I remember sitting at a party, my ankle wrapped in an ace bandage, and the woman who does the myofascial release in Toronto approaching me and saying, "What's wrong with your ankle?" And I explained to her, and she said, "Oh, it's just the fascia's twisted." She unwrapped the ace bandage so gently, untwisted the fascia with no pain at all, and indeed all of the pain in my ankle was completely gone. Is she doing something physical? Is she doing something energetic? It's very difficult to say. James Oshman moves into looking at allergies and certain pathologies and how they are associated with electromagnetic pollution and what is happening between the hands of the healer and the hands of the patient, even if that healer does not believe that they are working at all with energy medicine. And I think of the times that I have been, both myself and with others, to see doctors in the past 10 years and how absent that touch is. Often when I go to a doctor, it's because I'm afraid, it's because I feel inadequate to take care of myself. And human touch, the hand of the healer touching us, reaches into very deep core emotional parts of our being and says, everything will be okay. Whether it's true or not, we pick that up. And we pick that up as a belief. And it's one of the reasons that I call the Third River faith medicine. There's plenty of hard science out there to say that what we're talking about has a real basis. But that real basis, time and again, leads us back to our own inner path of healing in which we need to feel that we are cared for, in which the emotional and energetic aspects of our healing cannot be relegated off to the side, but need to be included in, and in my scheme of things, included in before we go cutting people or giving people drugs. What do you think, Gemini?
Sounds great to me.
Okay, well, let's come back next week and talk about homeopathy and flower essences and gemstones and a bunch of other interesting things here in the third medicine, the third river of healing. Green blessings, everyone.
Thank you so much, Susan. This concludes part 13 of our discussion on the 7 medicines the Wise Woman Way with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.